Mark Rogers, TV, talking some ACC football. It's always fun to make the prognostications. Whether it's in March, whether it's just a few weeks before the season, we bring in John Casilla from Noon's Magician, covering Syracuse football, to get his take on the ACC race very early in the process, with spring football for most of the teams starting either this week or, in the case of Syracuse, in just a few weeks. So, John, it's a situation with the ACC that, on one hand, the conference performed above expectations across the board in winning 9 of 12 postseason games. I don't want to make too much of that, but I think it was very substantial, because I think bowl games are the one time that we can match up like-seeded teams from the Power 5 conferences, and when you win 9 of 12, that is very substantial. It's a pretty good sample. And then you win some of the bigger games, meaning Florida State over Michigan, and most notably winning the national championship with Clemson. Now, there's a lot of quarterback losses to take into consideration for 2017, both in terms of the ACC competing across the board nationally and the teams that are competing for the ACC championship and for postseason play within the league. So what is your early take on the ACC?
You know, I think that the league has found a way to get past what it was mired in a few years ago, which was, one or two teams at the top. I think on top of your Clemsons and Florida States, I think North Carolina's emerged as a team that can win 9 games a year. Miami looks like they're resurgent under Mark Richt and is recruiting really well and seemed like a team that can win 8 or 9. Virginia Tech, was kind of fading a little bit at the end of the Frank Beamer era, and Reddy seems like they're a team that's going to win 8 or 9 a year. So you look at that, right away that's 5 teams. And then Louisville, too, looks like a team that under, Bobby Petrino seems like another 8 or 9 win team. So that right away, that's 6 off the top of your head. That's almost half the league that seems capable of winning, 8 or 9 games in the regular season. That's what the SEC has enjoyed at its high watermarks. And then where the ACC gets to surpass, leagues like maybe the Pac-12, is that they don't just have, a collection of teams hanging in the 8 or 9 win mark. Is that they have a couple teams, at 11 or 12 for the past few years. I think the conference is going to be able to reload, but you might see some different names at the top. This might be the year that we finally get that hoped and wished for Florida State Miami rematch in the ACC championship game after well over a decade of it in the works.
So, yeah, the Coastal Division has been a very much muddled situation. Virginia Tech, probably one of the better championship teams out of that division in the last several seasons. We've seen teams take turns. Duke, Georgia Tech, Virginia Tech emerged again in the first year under Justin Fuente. Miami, surprisingly, has never won the division, probably is the best roster talent. I know it's extremely close. It's not disparaging over the other teams. North Carolina, of course, being one of the more talented teams, loses its quarterback in Mitch Trubisky, as does Miami with Brad Kaya. Justin Thomas for a 9-win Georgia Tech team. He finally is leaving Atlanta after a long stint with Georgia Tech. Looking at your division, it seems to be Clemson, Florida State, Louisville look to be just as good as those two programs for about 2/3 of the season, but fell off drastically late. Probably isn't quite up to that elite level nationally, but is there a dark horse in either division, or maybe one in division that not necessarily is going to, especially in the Clemson-Florida State division, going to break out and win the entire division, but that you like as a sleeper?
I wish they weren't on Syracuse's schedule for next year, but I think Miami, despite the losses, I think that, Al Golden didn't do a great job coaching in game at the end of his time at Miami, but he did a great job bringing in a lot of talent. And Mark Richt has proven over his time at Georgia, and now I think in his first year at Miami, that he can get a lot out of players they're purely talented. And I think that's where you're going to see him take a fairly young roster and mold that into something that could potentially win the Coastal and maybe test whoever comes out of the Atlantic. I think, like I said, I think that's going to be Florida State, but it is very early. So I think Miami's probably your kind of dark horse, maybe 10-win team coming out of the ACC.
Yeah, I've got to go along with that as well. They were extremely young on defense last year, and the defensive metrics were outstanding and a huge improvement with a new defensive coordinator. Can't come up with his name. Manny Diaz, a defensive coordinator for Miami. They were much improved. They're going to have to settle on the quarterback situation. They've got like 3 guys in play. And they've got a freshman stud in N'Kosi Perry that Miami fans are hoping is able to mature and get ready for the season. I don't necessarily know if that's the case. And then, of course, as you well know, Clemson losing Deshaun Watson and a load of talent is still going to be extremely good. But maybe Florida State reclaims the crown with a veteran quarterback coming back in DeAndre Francois. What is the best case scenario for Syracuse that's realistic?
6-6 sounds about right. I know we've talked about it before. On top of a tough in-conference schedule, I mean, we have your Florida State, Louisville, Clemson. I believe we are on the road against NC State this year. We have to face Miami. And then we also are going to LSU, which is a death wish for a team that's kind of rebuilding, like Syracuse. But nonetheless, it should be a fun game. Hoping that kind of a clash of styles maybe yields at least an entertaining matchup, even if not a victorious one for Syracuse. But yeah, I think with a stacked schedule like that, you also face what's been a pesky Central Michigan team at home. Middle Tennessee brings back a lot. Obviously has a similarly up-tempo offense to Syracuse. 6-6 seems like a best case. We're definitely against the easier schedule. This team is talented enough to get there. Against this schedule, it's going to take a little bit of extra effort.
Yeah, for a guy that scored 51 touchdowns, won the Heisman Trophy, put up 63 against the likes of Florida State, it was a rough go against LSU in postseason play for Lamar Jackson. Couldn't get into the end zone, kicked 3 field goals, lost 29-9. An early season ACC look as the boys head to spring practice over the next 3 weeks. We will get you set as spring practice continues with Syracuse and others. John Casillo joining us from Noon's Magician to give us an early season look on the ACC. John, we appreciate the time.
Of course, Mark.